Jane Eyre, Chapter 8. Ere the half hour ended, 5 o'clock struck. School was dismissed, and all were gone into the refectory to tea. I now ventured to descend. It was deep dusk. I retired into a corner and sat down on the floor. The spell by which I had been so far supported began to dissolve. Reaction took place, and soon, so overwhelming was the grief that seized me, I sank prostrate with my face to the ground. Now I wept. Helen Burns was not there. Nothing sustained me. Left to myself, I abandoned myself, and my tears watered the boards. I had meant to be so good and to do so much at Lowood, to make so many friends, to earn respect and win affection. Already I had made visible progress. That very morning I had reached the head of my class. Miss Miller had praised me warmly. Miss Temple had smiled approbation. She had promised to teach me drawing and to let me learn French if I continued to make similar improvement 2 months longer. And then I was well received by my fellow pupils, treated as an equal by those of my own age, and not molested by any. Now, here I lay again, crushed and trod on. And could I ever rise more? Never, I thought, and ardently I wished to die. While sobbing out this wish in broken accents, someone approached. I started up. Again, Ellen Burns was near me. The fading fires just showed her coming up the long, vacant room. She brought my coffee and bread. "Come, eat something," she said, but I put both away from me, feeling as if a drop or a crumb would have choked me in my present condition. Helen regarded me, probably with surprise. I could not now abate my agitation, though I tried hard. I continued to weep aloud. She sat down on the ground near me, embraced her knees with her arms, and rested her head upon them. In that attitude she remained silent as an Indian. I was the first who spoke. "Helen, why do you stay with a girl whom everybody believes to be a liar?" "Everybody, Jane? Why, there are only 80 people who have heard you called so, and the world contains hundreds of millions." "But what have I to do with millions? The 80 I know despise me." "Jane, you are mistaken. Probably not one in the school either despises or dislikes you. Many, I am sure, pity you much." "How can they pity me after what Mr. Brocklehurst said?" "Mr. Brocklehurst is not a god, nor is he even a great and admired man. He is little liked here. He never took a step to make himself liked. Had he treated you as an especial favourite, you would have found enemies, declared or covert, all around you. As it is, the greater number would offer you sympathy if they dared. Teachers and pupils may look coldly on you for a day or two, but friendly feelings are concealed in their hearts, and if you persevere in doing well, these feelings will ere long appear so much the more evidently for their temporary suppression. Besides, Jane—" She paused. "Well, Helen?" said I, putting my hand into hers. She chafed my fingers gently to warm them, and went on. "If all the world hated you, and believed you wicked, while your own conscience approved you, and absolved you from guilt, you would not be without friends. No, I know I should think well of myself, but that is not enough. If others don't love me, I would rather die than live. I cannot bear to be solitary and hated, Ellen. Look here, to gain some real affection from you or Miss Temple, or any other whom I truly love, I would willingly submit to have the bone of my arm broken, or to let a bull toss me, or to stand behind a kicking horse, and let it dash its hoof at my chest." "Hush, Jane, you think too much of the love of human beings. You are too impulsive, too vehement. The sovereign hand that created your frame and put life into it has provided you with other resources than your feeble self, or than creatures feeble as you. Besides this earth, and besides the race of man, there is an invisible world and a kingdom of spirits. That world is round us, for it is everywhere, and those spirits watch us, for they are commissioned to guard us. And if we were dying in pain and shame, if scorn smote us on all sides and hatred crushed us, angels see our tortures, recognize our innocence, if innocent we be, as I know you are of this charge which Mr. Brocklehurst has weakly and pompously repeated at second hand from Mrs. Reed. For I read a sincere nature in your ardent eyes and on your clear front. And God waits only the separation of spirit from flesh to crown us with a full reward. Why then should we ever sink overwhelmed with distress, when life is soon over, and death is so certain an entrance to happiness, to glory? I was silent. Helen had calmed me, but in the tranquillity she imparted there was an alloy of inexpressible sadness. I felt the impression of woe as she spoke, but I could not tell whence it came, and when having done speaking, she breathed a little fast, and coughed a short cough. I momentarily forgot my own sorrows, yielded to a vague concern for her. Resting my head on Helen's shoulder, I put my arms round her waist. She drew me to her, and we reposed in silence. We had not sat long thus, when another person came in. Some heavy clouds, swept from the sky by a rising wind, had left the moon bare, and her light, streaming in through a window near, shone full both on us, and on the approaching figure, which we at once recognized as Miss Temple. "I came on purpose to find you, Jane Eyre," said she. "I want you in my room, and as Ellen Byrne is with you, she may come too." We went, following the superintendent's guidance. We had to thread some intricate passages and mount a staircase before we reached her apartment. It contained a good fire and looked cheerful. Miss Temple told Ellen Burns to be seated in a low armchair on one side of the hearth, and herself taking another, she called me to her side. "Is it all over?" she asked, looking down at my face. "Have you cried your grief away?" "I'm afraid I should never do that." "Why?" "Because I have been wrongly accused, and you, ma'am, and everybody else will now think me wicked." "We shall think you what you prove yourself to be, my child. Continue to act as a good girl, and you will satisfy me." "Shall I, Miss Temple?" "You will," said she, passing her arm around me. "And now tell me, who is this lady whom Mr. Brocklehurst called your benefactress?" "Mrs. Reed, my uncle's wife. My uncle is dead, and he left me to her care." "Did she not, then, adopt you of her own accord?" "No, ma'am. She was sorry to have to do it, but my uncle, as I often heard the servants say, got her to promise before he died that she would always keep me." "Well now, Jane, you know, or at least I will tell you, that when a criminal is accused, he is always allowed to speak in his own defense. You have been charged with falsehood. Defend yourself to me as well as you can. Say whatever your memory suggests as true, but add nothing and exaggerate nothing." I resolved in the depth of my heart that I would be most moderate, most correct, and having reflected a few minutes in order to arrange coherently what I had to say, I told her all the story of my sad childhood. Exhausted by emotion, my language was more subdued than it generally was when it developed the sad theme, and mindful of Helen's warnings against the indulgence of resentment, I infused into the narrative far less gall and wormwood than ordinarily. Thus restrained and simplified, it sounded more credible. I felt as if I went on, that Miss Temple fully believed me. In the course of the tale, I had mentioned Mr. Lloyd as having come to see me after the fit, for I never forgot the, to me, frightful episode of the Red Room, in detailing which my excitement was sure, in some degree, to break bounds. For nothing could soften, in my recollection, the spasm of agony which clutched my heart when Mrs. Reed spurned my wild supplication for pardon, and locked me a second time in the dark and haunted chamber. I had finished. Miss Temple regarded me a few minutes in silence, She then said, "I know something of Mr. Lloyd. I should write to him. If his reply agrees with your statement, you shall be publicly cleared from every imputation. To me, Jane, you are clear now." She kissed me, and still keeping me at her side, where I was well contented to stand, for I derived a child's pleasure from the contemplation of her face, her dress, her one or two ornaments, her white forehead, her clustered and shining curls, and beaming dark eyes.